Alright, hello everybody. Today we're going to be going through the Onshape Introduction to Sketching Learning Course exercises. So we'll get right into it. So the first one up is the basic sketching exercise. So I'll go ahead and, so the first thing we're going to do is make sure our workspace units are in millimeters, so we can do that like that. We just want to make sure that this length default unit is millimeters, which it is, which is good. And then we're going to want to go ahead and create a sketch on the top plane. So I'll just go ahead and grab that. And then I can press N to orient normal. I guess it was sideways, so I can just right click to rotate around and then get it so I'm lined up nice and correctly. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and sketch our basic outline. So I can go ahead and draw these circles in, right? And I can go ahead and draw some lines in. And so one thing to be careful of, right, you can see as I'm sketching, I can get like implicit auto constraints. So for example, it's giving me a horizontal auto constraint, you can see, which is good. We don't mind that. But you do want to be mindful as you're doing it that you're not getting ones you don't want. So here, for example, you can see it's making, here it's vertically in line, but here it's trying to make it also horizontally in line with the origin, right? And if we look, we can see we don't want that. So we want to be mindful of that. And I'll also point out, you can see, in fact, that the origin is, in fact, in the center of these circles. So you do want to be paying attention to that as you're going ahead and drawing this in. So then I'll go ahead and do this and this. Right there you can see I got a perpendicular constraint, which is fine. And then I can go ahead and grab this one. And then there's also a construction line they draw in here, right? So pretty straightforward so far. Okay, and then if we move on to the next slide, we can see we're supposed to add some constraints now, right? So here, for example, they call out like a vertical constraint with the origin here between this and this, so like making this like vertically in line. You can also use like a tangent constraint, which I'll do like this using T. And so it's the same effect when this line is horizontal. But you can see how the tangent works, so it just makes this line tangent with the circle from geometry class. And then I'll go ahead and make this line horizontal because we can see that it's not. And one thing I'll point out when I'm clicking and dragging, right, is dragging behavior is generally a little bit better if you're clicking and dragging points. When you click and drag lines, it doesn't work quite so well usually. So I always recommend dragging lines to see what the behavior is, or points to see what the behavior is. So I'll go ahead and make this horizontal. And then we can see they're asking, and then we can see they're asking for an equal constraint between these three lines, right? So making them all the same length. Of course, you could just, you don't necessarily have to use an equals constraint. You could just like dimension these to all be the same length or whatever. But of course, that's more work and harder to maintain. So if we have relationships like that, we can go ahead and capture those using constraints rather than having to add a bunch of duplicate dimensions. So then let's see here. Do we have anything else? Oh yeah. So I see here these aren't in line, which is a little strange. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. You can make these 2 points vertically in line with each other using V and vertical like this. You can also grab make these two lines coincident with each other. That would also work. So, okay, yep, so I think that's everything. So I'll move on. So now we're going to start dimensioning. So I can grab my dimension here, and then I'm going to go ahead and dimension this and this line here. Sure, this will be 200. Right, you can see the first dimension we add scales the entire sketch. So like if I change this, my entire sketch scales to match. It's just a fun behavior in Onshape. And then now we can go in and add the rest of our dimensions. So I'll grab this one here is 70. This one here is 50, right? And again, I don't have to dimension these other ones because of that equals constraint we added. And then I can also dimension this distance between the circles to be 35. And so at this point, we can see my entire sketch is black. So that means I did everything correctly. And if there was something that wasn't, at this point, right? So for example, if you delete that constraint, now we can see it's what it looks like when it's not fully constrained. And so in order to troubleshoot this, I would probably try to find like a blue point and click and drag it. And so here you can see, like, as I click and drag this, you can see, like, oh, like this line is, you know, not always horizontal. That's probably not what we want. And so we can fix that with like a horizontal constraint. Yeah, so that's how you can like troubleshoot your sketch if you're not fully defined. Okay, so moving on. So now we're gonna add 2 circles over here. So we can just go ahead and do that. And then they have us draw on a construction line here with the purpose of being centered on this midpoint here, right? So if I do this like this, I can see I can get a couple different auto constraints here, right? Obviously coincident to the line is the easiest one, but then I can also have this here. Let's see here. Yeah, so here, well, I get a lot of modes. Yeah, so here you can see the perpendicular with this line. So this line is perpendicular to that line, you can see. If I move my mouse a little bit more, here I'm grabbing the midpoint. And then I think those are the modes, yeah. So you just want to be mindful of like what auto constraints you're getting. Of course, you can also just press and hold shift and not get any, and just like draw in your line and then add all your constraints manually. That's also perfectly valid. So that's what I'll do here. So I'll go ahead and make this coincident, so that way it's on the line. And then they're saying they want this to be on the midpoint. So I'll grab my midpoint constraint and grab this like that. So now my point is on the midpoint of this line. And then of course this should be horizontal. And then this distance here is 35. And one thing I'll point out is you don't actually need this construction line to dimension this 35 distance, right? You can do that without the construction line. The only reason we have to do the construction line here, or, well, you technically don't even have to, but just to help pick up this midpoint constraint, so that you don't have to dimension it, you know, this way, right? Yeah. Okay, and then this diameter is 25, right? And then now looking at the other side, yeah, so here, there's a couple different ways you could do this. The way I'm gonna do it is I'm actually gonna add a symmetric constraint. So I'm gonna say these 2 circles here should be symmetric about the front plane. You could also choose this line as well. I'm just taking advantage of the fact that planes which are perpendicular to a sketch can be used just like lines. But yeah, so then that makes these 2 symmetric about that plane, and so that's enough to fully constrain it. You could also add like an equals constraint and like make this like vertically in line. That would also do it, or I guess you'd also have to make it like dimension, well, yeah, symmetric is probably the easiest way to do that. Although I guess, yeah, if you didn't want to do the symmetric, you could also do like, you could add like this line, or you could add like a point explicitly here on this midpoint, right? And then you can make this like horizontally in line, and like vertically in line up here, and then like equal, right? And that would also be enough to fully constrain it. So there's, you know, a bunch of different ways to do this. Yeah, and so here you can see I don't actually technically need the construction line. You can get away with, if you just like create the point explicitly, then you can add the horizontally inline constraint. And then like the dimension, right, you don't need the construction line to add it, you can just do it immediately. Anyway, yeah, so that looks good. We can see we're all black, so we're fully constrained, so we like that. Yeah, so then we can go ahead and confirm this sketch. And now we're going to do the self-check. So we're supposed to measure this area. And we can see here it's 16,682. If we do the self-check, we can see that is indeed an answer. So we did that correctly. Yeah, cool. So now we're going to move on to intermediate sketching. So we're going to go ahead and create a new part studio. You could, yeah. And I'm going to name this intermediate sketching. Okay. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure, we're going to want to go ahead and start a sketch on the front plane. So we can go ahead and do that. Press N to orient normal. Right. Okay, and so once again, we want to pay attention to where the origin is when we're starting out. So here we can see it's in the bottom right-hand corner of this sketch. So this construction line is here, and then we also have these 2 lines here. And once again, you want to be paying attention to what auto constraints you're getting, right? So for example, if you're drawing this like this, right, then you're not getting the vertical auto constraint, so you're going to have to add that manually yourself. But yeah, So we can see that this is with the auto constraints I just got, right? We can see if I show my constraints, right? This is vertical, this is horizontal, this is vertical, and then these touch, and this touches the origin. So we're happy with that. Moving right along. So now we're supposed to add an arc. There's a couple different modes you can use. They recommend a 3-point arc. A center point arc is also fine here. I'll do a 3-point arc. So I just grab my 2 points, right? And then I can make this, and then I can set the middle like this, right? And one thing to be mindful of when you're drawing the arc, right, is you don't want to, one thing to be mindful is these points aren't actually vertically in line. That's something I see a mistake happen a lot. Is people like to make these vertically in line because it kind of looks like they are, but they're not actually. If you do that, then it'll be wrong and you'll be sad. Yeah. Okay, moving right along. I'll pull this out a little bit more, sure. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and mirror these, right? So I'll grab these entities. I don't want to mirror my center blind, so I'll deselect that. Oops, not that. Do that again. So I'll grab my mirror, and then here I can choose my construction line that I've created, but I can also choose the right plane, once again using a plane perpendicular to a sketch as a line. Either selection works. So there you can see I have my mirror, right? And we can see in fact that they are mirrors. And one thing I'll point out is all mirror does is it creates copies of all my entities. So it's equivalent to like sketching this out and then adding symmetric constraints manually. So here you can see I'm getting, I just have like copies of all my entities, right? And then there's just some symmetric constraints connecting everything or connecting the two sides. And so like if this got deleted, for example, I could just redraw it or like remirror it. But you know, that's all there is to it. So yeah. Okay, so now they want us to add a tangent arc connecting the top. So we can use the tangent arc tool. So if I click that, I get a tangent arc, and then I can click over here. Oh, it doesn't. Okay. Yeah. And then I can like connect it like that using a coincident. And that works, right? You could also use an arc and then add the tangent constraint manually as well. That would also be valid. And then here I don't need a tangent constraint on this side because it's symmetric. And so one of the properties just causes it to implicitly be tangent, which is cool. Yeah, and then we're supposed to make this center point here coincident with this. So we'll go ahead and do that. Cool. All right. And now we're ready to dimension. So I see here we have a 125 millimeter dimension, and that first one scales our entire sketch, right? This is going to be 200 millimeters, right? So now it looks a little goofy, but we can just drag it around a little bit. This is supposed to be 75. Yep. Okay. And then this is 50. Yep. And then from here to here is 125. Yeah. And so at this point, it should be nice and happy. And then one thing, again, just make sure you don't have a vertical constraint between here and here. So, you know, if you have something like that, right, you can then it'll Onshape will complain that there's too many constraints. It can't figure out a valid solution. And so here I would just have to delete that myself. But yeah. Okay, moving right along. So yeah, so and then we can see this is all black, so it's fully constrained, so we're happy. All right. So now they want us to offset this arc here. And then if so once I click this line, you can see I get this click to confirm icon. And then I can also click and drag this to update my preview. So I'll just go ahead and confirm that there. And then I can edit this dimension. Once I exit out of the offset tool, I can edit this dimension to be 40 millimeters. Cool. Yeah. And then we're supposed to add a line, which is vertical. Okay, and then we're supposed to connect these with an arc. So here Okay, they recommend using tangent arc, that's fine. So I'll grab a tangent arc and I'll click here. Oh, that was just a line, oops. Yeah, so I'll grab that. And then, yeah, and then I'm gonna wanna add the tangent on the other side over here. So I have it's tangent over here and tangent over here, so I have like a nice smooth connection. Yeah, and then once again, we're gonna sketch mirror these guys. So we're just gonna go ahead and grab those, mirror, and then I will, oops. Okay, that's funny. So what happened there was, because I pre-selected these, one of the pre-selection behaviors is if you have a single line selected, Onshape will grab that automatically as your mirror line. And so actually what happened there is it's mirroring about this line, which is wrong. So we don't want that. So instead I'm going to select my mirror tool first, select my mirror line, which will be this right plane, and then I'll select my entities to mirror afterwards. So it's just one of the pitfalls of like pre-selecting before I activate the tool instead of the other way around. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then we're going to go ahead and add an arc. And here I'm just going to draw a regular 3-point arc manually. And then here I can get like the tangent constraint on one side, which is cool. And that makes it tangent on the other side implicitly, which is neat. Yeah, cool. And then we're going to add a rectangle. I'll use center point rectangle here. It's probably the easiest. Yep. And then I'll just go draw it in like that. Seems fine. And then we just go ahead and dimension that up. So this will be 80. This will be 25. And here I can dimension off of the top plane if I want to be fancy instead of the line. It's just like not really a big difference, but it's worth pointing out you can do that. Make that 20. And then this is 15. This is 100 here. And then I'm noticing this isn't connected, so I probably need a coincident here. And then if I click and drag this, I can see this is unconstrained. Yep, and this is supposed to be 40. Cool. Yeah, so now we can see everything is black, so we so we know it's fully constrained. And again, if anything was blue, I would probably want to try to find a blue point and click and drag it and see how it's how it can move, just like I did with this arc, to identify any degrees of freedom, and then try to figure out what constraint I'm missing. Yeah. Okay, so I'll go ahead and confirm that sketch. And then we can grab this area. We can see it's 24906. And so if we go to the self-check, we can see that is indeed an answer, and it is correct. So we did that right. So good. I hope this is helpful, and I'll talk to you guys later.